Okay, well, we will make a start. So tansitalia ni tutamtik Raylene Whitford Nitsiga so nechiosko mina apitawagusen. I just said in my traditional language, which is Cree, hello everybody, my name's Raylene Whitford, I am Cree Métis. As we do, I'm going to start with the land acknowledgement. So I'm joining Yapiao Sagaigan, which is on the traditional territory of Treaty 6 and Métis Nation Zone 3. This area is traditionally a gathering place for Stony and Cree peoples, and it's a place where for thousands of years our ancestors gathered around the lake to fish and harvest medicines and trade. And today it's a place that is in the heart of the energy industry. But it's a place where humans and more than humans gather to rest and heal, including myself and my family. So I'm mindful that you may be joining us from another treaty region, another Métis nation, unceded land, or another part of the world where First Peoples remain. So I encourage us all to reflect that wherever we are, we stand on a land that carries the footsteps and hearts of many First Peoples who have been here and will continue to be here for many thousands of years to come. So welcome to the first of our workshop series entitled How to Harness Your Indigenous Superpower. And this is a topic that has been coming up again and again over the last few months. The first time I heard about an Indigenous superpower was when I was speaking with Jerome a few months ago now. And I was just really keen to explore this, what this actually meant and how we can kind of share it with the wider INDIGI-X network of Indigenous professionals, change makers, life weavers, and circuit breakers. So just to begin of an intro, maybe we'll ask our two panelists to share your name, your pronouns, what nation or iwi you belong to, and what your Indigenous superpower is. Maybe we'll start with Joey.
Joey and Squess. I just said in my traditional language, hello everyone. My name is Joey Rue. I am originally from Kamloops. My home nation is Chutra. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm so nervous right now. My Indigenous superpower is one of connection and empowerment.
Amazing, amazing. You have no reason to be nervous.
I know, but it's so cool.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jerome.
Kia ora koutou. I te tautoku pāpā ko maunga tautari te maunga ko Waikato te awa. Ko tainui te waka ko pohara me maunga tautari ngā marae. Ko tainui te iwi ko Ngāti Kuriki kaukuru te hapu. I te tautoku māma, no Hamo te tehi hawhe, ko le pēr te hapu. No Finland, te tehi atu hawhe ona, no reira, he Finnish, Māori, Samoan ahau. My name is Jerome, ko Jerome Tairi, taku ingoa. I am from the Waikato region of the North Island and Aotearoa. My dad is Māori. The first part of what I just said was where my father is from, what his mountain is, his river, my iwi, and my mum is half Samoan and half Finnish. I like to say that I'm 100% Samoan, 100% Māori, and 100% Finnish, and I bring all of that to every situation I enter into, and I guess that is what I would talk about as being my superpower, is the permission that I give myself and my ability to embrace wholeheartedly who I am in every situation. But I look forward to talking more about that soon.
Amazing. Thank you both. Both superpowers are very important to me personally, so I'm looking forward to exploring each with both of you. So because we're such a small group, I encourage everybody, if you have any immediate questions, throw them in the chat. We're going to go through kind of not an interview, but a fireside chat for about 40 minutes, and then we'll end with some open questions, reflections, etc. But if you have any burning questions, just throw them in the chat and we can ask them. So just kind of high level, I'm really keen to understand each of your journeys. I know you both have had very different kind of paths to get to where you are today. I'm sure there's some similarities. But can you share with us just in a few moments what your journey has been, what it took for you to get to where you are today, and what life experiences led you to finding your superpower? And I'll leave it open to either of you to answer first. So go ahead.
I'll do it. So like I was saying, my name is Joey Rue. I am a makeup artist, model, influencer, and public speaker. So I actually went through quite a dark and sad part of my journey. I had a lot of loss go on in my life. And there was a moment when I was not planning on being here anymore, that I was actually out to lunch with a friend, and a designer came up to me and was like, wow, I really like your style. Would you ever consider modeling for me? And I was like, yes, yes, I will. And I didn't choose to end my life that day because there was something for me to look forward to. It was great for a while, and my mental health and addiction didn't get any better. And it came to a point where the people around me were no longer really interested in being around me, and reached out to my family. And my mom came to pick me up, and I actually live in Victoria now, but I lived in Victoria previously. And my mom came to pick me up and brought me back to Kamloops, my hometown. And I got to get my feet back on solid ground, get my mental health in check. And I worked really, really hard, and I worked some really crappy jobs. And I was actually a drywall laborer up until a few months ago, at the beginning of this year, I guess. And I was doing makeup and modeling in my spare time, just freelance. And I did a photo shoot for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women in Two-Spirit. And it was actually in the newspaper. It was a big red dress shoot. There were 7 of us models, and we could see the Kamloops Residential School in the background. And it was in the newspaper, and so it caught the attention of the Salmon Arm Art Center. And they invited me to be part of their exhibit, Breaking the Binary. And I was like, well, I'm kind of perfect for this. Let's do it. And so I got to see my modeling photos, like big, huge modeling photos up on the wall. And then they introduced me to my now boss, Missy McIntosh at Miss Mac Cosmetics, where me and Raylene met. And so I would travel back and forth between Kamloops and Salmon Arm a few times a month. And then over the holidays last year, she asked if I would move back to Victoria and work at the Victoria store here. This was a crazy, crazy question, because I was like, oh my God, there's no way I'm ready to go back there. I don't know if I can do this. And here I am. So, and I wouldn't be able to do that without the amazing connection and support of my community and my family and my friends, of course. And now I feel like I'm rambling, so someone else can go now.
That was good. Thanks for sharing. So for those that aren't aware, Joey and I have only just met, despite us being on the same advertisement. We've only just met, so I'm learning this stuff as Joey's sharing as well. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate taking that position. It's not always taking a vulnerable, easy taking a vulnerable position. And I think that kind of links into where, if I think about my background, I grew up, so a quick little first 18-year, 20-year kind of seconds over that were, I grew up around domestic violence and drug and alcohol abuse and all that sort of stuff. It was quite typical for Māori and Pacific population, particularly in small towns, to grow up this way. It was very normal in my family, at least. I know there are many that are not in that situation, but it was very normal for my family. You know, we grew up around domestic violence, so we were living in women's refuges for a large part of our life. And then it wasn't until I kind of started my career in banking, and I kind of happened upon it. It didn't really it wasn't something that I pursued. I didn't ever think I would get a job in a kind of a corporate career type job. I didn't think it was something that I was able to aspire to. And it kind of just eventuated. I got this call to say that I've secured this interview. I don't know how I even applied for the job. Anyway, I got the interview, went for the interview, and I started working at one of the banks here in Aotearoa. And my career started from there. And I used to get pulled into the boardroom a lot in various roles, I had a kind of 10 different roles while I was in banking, but I used to always get pulled into kind of around the boardroom table to talk about strategy, to get my feedback on the direction that we were heading in, whether or not it was the right way or what my feedback might have been for those particular situations. And every time I'd walk in there, I used to think, why are you asking me? I don't understand why you want my perspective. I'm this young Māori boy. I'm the only brown-skinned person on this floor in this corporate building in the middle of Wellington. I lived in Wellington at the time. And I used to always question myself and doubt who I was, because I used to think I wasn't worthy of this seat around this table, which largely was middle-aged white men. And I used to feel inadequate. And so it wasn't until kind of years down the track where I started mentoring young people who were young Māori and young Pacific Island young men. And I used to talk to them about what sat inside of them, the potential that was inside of them, and that hey, look, this is where I am, and this is where I've come from, and was a heavy alcoholic, grew up around similar environments, but through right choices and what I thought back then was a bit of luck, I managed to get through that. And it wasn't until I reflected back that I was being pulled in because of the unique perspectives that I held. I didn't understand at the time that the perspectives that I held were largely linked to and directly linked to my culture, my Indigenous culture, being Māori, being Pacific Island, and being Finnish. I didn't realize that the way that I engaged with people, the way that I interacted with people was through a Te Ao Māori perspective. I wasn't raised in traditional Māori ways or Pacific Island ways. It just happened to be kind of what naturally came out of the way that I operated. And it's not until, ever since that moment, I kind of started to look at my whakapapa, where I came from, who my ancestors were, why I might be the way that I am. And linking all that up, I realized people would see the amazingness that was in me, but I used to think it was tokenism, but I realized that it was actually the unique way that I operated, the unique way that I saw things, the unique way that I would approach people. The fact that for Māori, wānanga is really important, to sit down and kind of talk through stuff as opposed to talk at people. It was really important for me to have reciprocal relationships in Pasifika culture, well, in Māori as well, but in Pasifika culture, it was really important to build reciprocity. So to give and to share and to have communal ways of moving forward with just stuff that I just thought was important, but I didn't realize it was because of who I was, that's where it all came from. And so now I am where I am today, and realizing that embracing all of that is a superpower that too many of us are not tapping into, because we don't realize that is part of who we are and the reasons why we do and act the way that we do.
So this is really interesting. So I both, like, there's some similarities that I picked up. So you both maybe started in different professional roles and maybe life circumstances that were really different to where you are now. But you've both evolved and you've come into your own. So I'm curious to explore, where does your indigeneity feature in this? Like, how important was it to this path and the kind of intergenerational connectedness to our ancestors, etc.? Like, how does all that feature? I know that's a really big question, so feel free to pass if you would like.
No, definitely. I'll definitely go for this one. My indigeneity is so huge into who I am now. Like I'm originally from Kamloops, which was the origination of the discovery of the children. It was actually like right across the highway from my childhood home and where my mom still lives. So I didn't really embrace my culture until maybe a year, like a year and a half before that. And it was when I started reconnecting with my roots. And it was so instrumental in my healing journey and, getting me through like the darkest of dark times. I always had community at community events with other Indigenous people I grew up with, reconnecting with all of that. And so much of what I do now is I want to be the Indigenous queer, you know, guy wearing makeup with nails, with a beard that like I needed and I never saw growing up. And I think that is it's just like, I don't know. I get so excited when I see people excited about me. And I mean, that sounds so selfish, but just like I see kids and they're like, oh, and it's like, yeah, like you can, like they might have different home situations and stuff where they can't express who they are. And I just want to be a walking beam for them.
You're being the person that you might have needed many years ago for others.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think for me, I mean, you kind of touched on something which we often throw around in being that you can't be what you can't see. Like there's limited examples, particularly for our rangatahi. That's a little bit of I guess progressing forward from where I just talked about before. I'm now I left the corporate world because I felt like it wasn't having the impact that I wanted to have, and so I slowly started progressing out of big corporate down to small business or medium enterprise, down to small business, now running my own thing where I help young people, rangatahi, young adults get into business or advance in their career. And that has come about through helping them to understand the potential that sits inside of them, because often they don't have those examples around them. And so therefore they just think they'll do what their aunties and uncles have always done, because that's what you do in their family. And that came about through a real world example where I was mentoring a young guy who I said to him one day when I was sitting with him, I said, oh, look, what do you want to be? Where do you want to go to? And he's 19 years old at the time. And he said, oh, I'm going to go work at Jack's Links, which is a factory selling beef jerky. And he basically said, I'm going to go sit on the factory line and process in Jack's Links. And I said, oh, cool. So why do you want to work there? And he said, oh, because that's what my dad and my uncle did. I said, cool. So why do you want to work there? He said, well, that's just what my family does. We work at Jack's Links. And I said, well, but why do you want to work there? And he couldn't, and he got stuck for a bit. And he goes, well, yeah, because that's where we go. And I said, okay, well, I believe that you could work at the bank if you wanted to work at the bank, or you could work at a corporate, or you could do this other stuff. And he sat there looking at me in disbelief almost. And I said, well, let's just push the boundaries a little bit. And I'm willing to get you an interview at the bank if you are happy to put in the work behind the scenes to, get your CV up to par and get your interview skills up to par. If you get the job, it's all going to be based on your interview and how you perform. Anyway, got him the interview and took him in, and he performed in the interview. He ended up getting a job, and he was the highest performing teller, bank teller in Auckland City for the year that he had started. And he was earning the highest amount of money in his family, and it was not a high paying salary, highest amount of money in his salary out of his aunties, uncles, cousins, and all of that. And I thought that would have been a good thing, right? You'd think that would be a good thing, but it actually, he was pulled down by his own. He was pulled down by his own siblings, his own family, who would say to him and give comments to him like, "What do you think? You're too good for us now? Are you, do you feel like now that you have to wear a suit and tie that you are too good?" And it made me realize that there's a whole kind of ecosystem that's necessary to support people through this process. It's not just giving them someone who they can see, but it's also working alongside the whānau, the family. It's also helping the whole whānau along on the journey. I mean, I feel like it's such a complicated ecosystem. And I don't even know if that answers your question, Raylene, but tagged off of having an example that you can see that there's that, and then there's so much more that we can be doing and that we need to be doing for our rangatai, for this next generation coming through, to be able to get them to the next stage, to help them understand their own superpower.
I completely agree. And so much of your story, Jerome, resonated with me. I think like we have an opportunity to make a correction and to improve the generations that are behind us. But it's not just as simple as putting a person into a new role or into a new city or what have you. It is that kind of supportive system. And so I think it's really difficult to help others do that unless you've done it yourself, right? So can we, like, I know one of the questions that we discussed when we first all met each other right before this call, but can we explore some of the threats to you know, maintaining and growing and developing your own Indigenous superpower? Because I think it's not something that I feel is talked about enough. And I also think once you have your superpower, or you've come into your own, like your situation isn't going to stay the same. So can you maybe share some thoughts of how you protect yourself, how you keep enough, there's a little bit of gas left in the tank for yourself through this process?
Yes.
Joey. I was waiting for the mouth to open. Right? Go, Joey.
Yeah, so like we were kind of talking about this a little earlier, and the question, it kind of like stumped me, but something that I find like it's all about connection for me. And like we as Indigenous people, we are such a community-based people that isolation is like, it's the worst thing for us, and it's the worst thing for people in general. So I find a lot of my like my guards and stuff are when I'm around my community doing service work. I'm sober, and so going to AA, going early to AA to make the coffee, you know, it's like it's small service work things that really build up my confidence and make it so that I'm able to go out into the world.
Nice. It's kind of that community resilience stuff. I mean, if we can continue to build up and know and recognize that other people are on the same page as us and feel the same way, it's like, man, we can do this together collectively. One of the things that I found most challenging in understanding my culture, understanding particularly being Māori, and I'm not someone, I don't speak fluent Te Reo Māori, I don't speak my language fluently, nor do I understand my whakapapa in the detail that I want to. And I found that a real challenge, not because I it's hard to understand, but because, and this is my experience, not necessarily everyone else's, but my experience is that societal pressures can make you feel as though you're not enough, that you're not Māori enough, that because I don't speak Te Reo Māori, or because I don't have parents that can sit on the paipai or sit at the marae and talk and be an orator in Te Reo, that I am not Māori enough, or that I might not be able to sit down with a kaumatua or kuia and talk about where I'm from and what, you know, all about my aunties and my uncles and all of that sort of stuff, that I'm not Māori enough. And that whole, even, I mean, the pronunciation of Māori words, there is in Aotearoa, you'll have both Māori and non-Māori kind of say comments when people might pronounce something incorrectly, and it will be a sarcastic kind of snarky comment, and without any, potentially there's no bad intention behind it, but you feel as though, do I really want to attempt to learn Te Reo Māori? I am Māori, and I feel like I should know Māori. I was at a hui at a meeting just a few weeks ago, and it was a hui for all board members across all of Aotearoa, board members for school board members. We all met in Christchurch, and I was in the Te Tiriti o Waitangi workshop, and sitting in there, I was probably one of a handful of Māori in that workshop, and the facilitator was talking about Te Tiriti, the Treaty of Waitangi, and talking about how we can bring effect to that in our school. schools across Aotearoa. And I was sitting there thinking, I don't understand Te Tiriti. I don't understand it well enough. I might have brown skin, I might have a Maori surname, but I don't understand it. And he was up there saying, I know you guys understand this already, so I'm just going to go and, you know, carry on into this other part. And I could see everyone else kind of sitting there looking at each other like, oh, I feel a little bit inadequate here. So I put my hand up and I said, you know, I might look Maori and my surname might be Maori, but I don't understand Te Tiriti. I don't understand how to bring effect to it. So I need you to break this down for me. And I feel like if we don't do that, people are going to feel too embarrassed to put themselves forward and to learn more about the stuff. And I think when I think about a threat, I think it's also in our own Indigenous community that we face threats from, because I mean, you can call the threat coming from them or my response to that. Because I can either take a response to that and kind of take on some imposter syndrome because of the way that they might be treating me or because of what they might say, or if I'm strong enough, I could then say, it's all good. You got your perspective. I'm on my journey and I'm going to embrace where I'm at on my journey. So that's how I deal with it. If I ever have that stuff pop up, I always think I'm on my journey and no one else understands the journey that I'm on. Therefore, I'm going to embrace wholeheartedly who I am, where I am for the moment that I'm in at that time.
This notion of the perfect Indigenous person, I've been thinking a lot about, right? Because I think we all have this idea or this ideal that has been given to us by Hollywood, which is untrue. The perfect Indigenous person has 100% bloodline. They can speak their language fluently. They, you know, have the most beautiful beadwork that ever existed and blah, 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 blah. But I think this notion of like the perfect Indigenous person, at least for me, personal perspective, is the threat. And that needs to be unpicked because it doesn't exist. And we're all on our own journey to continue to develop ourselves and our identity. And I think to Joey's point, the trait of reciprocity and acts of service, that really resonated with me because I was having a conversation with somebody last week. I was going through something really difficult at work. And, you know, she was non-Indigenous and she said, look, you have to do it for yourself. You need to do it. You know, stand up for yourself, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as she said, you need to do this because of all of the other young women who are watching you right now, that's who you need to do it for. And then as soon as she said it that way, I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this for them. I can break this trail. So yeah, thank you. Those 2 points really resonated with me.
I was just like with Tammy just put a comment in there around verbalizing your place on the journey brings power to others on a similar journey. And I think that rings so true to me because I just think without those little glimpses of seeing other people do that sort of stuff, that's what gave me the courage to go. I mean, there was this one guy and his name's, he won't mind mentioning his name. His name's Ashley, and he was and he didn't speak Te Reo Māori. And he was on this journey, and he and I used to sit around and we would talk to each other, and we would be like, "Man, I just don't feel Māori enough. Like I feel like I need to be." And he ended up deciding that he was going to go into full immersion, a full immersion kura with his mum, for the past year. This is going back a year or two, and then now he speaks fluent Te Reo Māori. But to see that has been hugely inspiring. But even to see where he's at now in his journey that he takes is so transparent. But I think, yeah, so right, Tammy, like sharing that was empowering for me, and I know that it would be empowering for others for us to do the same.
I saw that. That's so awesome. And I love that he did it with his mom.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on. So my question is, how do you know once you found it, right? So it sounds like you both went through this process of kind of facing adversity, but how did you know once you hit your stride? Like, how did it actually feel to maybe those on the call or watching the recording who might not feel like they're there yet? Can you explain like the body feeling or the types of things that happen once you've found your superpower, once you've found your strength?
Yeah, definitely. It literally felt like I was wearing my face for the first time. Like it felt like a mask was coming off. Like, I feel like my superpower is something of connection and empowerment. And it really changed for me when people started asking for me, when people started asking me to show up or asking me to speak on this beautiful panel. You know, it was because it was such a change from where I was, where people were, you know, seeing my actions and seeing the things I was doing to myself and others and distancing themselves. And now it was the opposite, because I was truly myself and I was able to empower others by showing up, by being present, being myself, being there.
I describe that as and I think I share the same sentiments, but I describe it as a feeling of authenticity. Like I just feel authentic.
Yeah.
And when I feel authentic, I mean, an example of that is I used to go into workplaces earlier on in my career, and I would feel like I had to put on, this is going to sound so wrong. I had to put on this white voice or to try and talk and sound the same to have the credibility that I needed to have in that workplace. And then as I started to be more comfortable and confident in who I was, and the fact that I was Māori and that was unique, and that I was Pacifica and that was unique, and that is what they don't realize that they're after. It wasn't until that point that I started to not completely change who I was, because I think you got to be able to adapt in some cases, but I was able to walk into those environments and feel as though what I was saying was in line with how I was behaving, how I thought. So my thoughts, my actions, and my behavior were in alignment. It wasn't, and I was the same person that I was in the workplace, as I was at home with my wife and my kids, as I was when I was mentoring young people, when it didn't change. The person who I was never changed. And I feel like that at that point I was like, cool, I'm actually confident, I'm actually bold in who I am and embracing who I am, when all of that was aligned. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think about at least my own kind of education in business. It was informed by, you know, the Donald Trumps and the kind of Dragon's Dens, and you see all this thing. I don't know. I don't these days. I don't watch TV. I think I probably watched too much growing up. But you're taught when you're younger that you have to fake it, that you need to be hard, you need to be tough, you need to be, you know, hard line negotiator. But the best that I've ever seen in business and the best leadership that I've ever seen comes from a place of authenticity and vulnerability. You know, it's when people admit, I don't know, or I will find out, or I'm on this journey. So yeah, I can see how that's empowering.
Yeah, that example that you just gave now is a very real example for me. I had there's a general manager at the bank, a Māori lady who was in a position, didn't study, didn't go to university, but was in an executive level position in the bank. And I was privileged to certain meetings and would see the way that she'd operate. And I could tell that she was just who she was at home as who she was in that work environment. And she would say stuff like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you mean. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And it would just be standard kind of business terminology, but she would just be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Can you break it down? I need you to simply explain it to me. And that was the stuff that I was like, man, but in my culture, it would be like, you've just got to be frank and open and honest and feel like you have permission to be able to operate like that. And that was inspiring. That's what I found, like, oh man, I want to be like that. So I've taken it on board.
Well, you both have this incredible aura about you. So I met Jerome, again, I can't even remember, a few months back. I'm not even sure how we connected. It was on LinkedIn and we had a virtual coffee, but I left that coffee just thinking, wow, you know, he is so amazing. He's got it. He knows what he's doing. He's doing something incredible. And same with Joey. Like, I found Joey on TikTok. Not that I watch a lot of TikTok, but And things happened, and I found myself in Victoria like the next week, and I was like, I want to have a makeup session with Joey, and I did. And as soon as I walked into the store, like, again, just this aura, this emanating light. So you both have definitely found your superpower, and you're living your truth, and you're inspiring others, not least myself. So thank you for that. I guess the last kind of question that I'll ask before we open it up to the others on the call. So what advice, if you could give one piece of advice to a superhero in training, who was meant to join us today, but he couldn't make it because of the snowstorm that's happening in the Western prairies in Canada. But if you could give a little 9-year-old superhero in training some advice, what would that be?
So this is advice that I would even give myself when I was struggling. Some of the terminology I'll use is like probably not going to be suitable for a 9-year-old, but I was really like mesmerized by like the glitz and glamour of like what you'd see on like TV and online and everything. And I wanted to just be like an Instagram influencer. And through the process of my healing journey, I really became a good influence. And so my advice is to find sustainable influences in your life and look up to people who are going to be there when things and talk about and now I have a really great influence in my life. She's my mentor, my boss, my friend, Missy McIntosh. She really believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. She made my dreams come true, becoming a makeup artist, and I hope I get to make someone's dream come true too.
Thanks, Joey. I would say, I mean, I'll probably take it back to a Māori whakatauki, a Māori proverb, and it's he tina ki runga, he tā mori ki raro, which is kind of ground yourself in a strong foundation, and proper grounding in your culture and your heritage, and you'll find satisfaction in life, which to me, that speaks to kind of the journey that you're on. If you can embrace that journey of learning about who you are, where you come from, why you might do, say, and act the way that you do, you can grow in confidence and boldness and be more authentic in who you are. And that's if I can raise children that live authentically, that to me is success for me. And so that would be the advice that I give to my 11-year-old son and my 6-year-old daughter.
Amazing. Well, thank you both. And I just, I'd love to open it up to questions from our lovely group here, if there are any. I know that we know most of you, if not all, so I'd welcome you to just maybe raise your hand if you can, and we'll ask some questions to our awesome panelists. Don't be shy. Jesus, go ahead.
So this is probably a question just in regards to like, how do you embrace your powers, your superpowers, when everyone around you is much different than you? Like, how do you do that? Like how do you be sensitive when everyone in your family is tough? That's my superpower.
I would say that is your superpower right there. Being able to be sensitive is such a superpower, especially in a tough environment. You're a light.
That's what I was told. It's just hard, like, because everyone thinks so differently. They wonder like, why is he crying, or why is he feeling this way, or why is he getting upset this way? And it's hard to explain to them that like I feel feelings very profoundly. And even just like being around my niece today in the hospital, she was sad. I could just feel that energy. And I felt weak. I felt weak because of it.
I
How do
mean,
you embrace that?
I would say that you do. I mean, it's a journey to embrace that, and I feel like I feel as though you've described something that's very similar with me. That I feel the feelings, and I'm very emotionally driven. But I do call that as part of my superpowers. It's kind of my deck of superpowers that I would bring out, and I'd be like, yeah, no, this is how I operate in this setting. But also realizing that is what, if you understand the flow on impact and the benefit that people experience through that gift that you have, through that superpower that you have, then that kind of makes it better for me to operate wholeheartedly in it. So that when I know that I'm sensitive, and I know that I can empathize with people, and I know that I can understand people more than most, I know that I can truly change someone's life. Whereas something that might come with a little bit more harshly may not. They will have different lives that they can impact. And when I walk in that, I'm like, it doesn't really bother me so much how the lives that other people might impact, because I know what part I'm playing.
For sure. Thanks for the advice.
No.
Appreciate it.
Awesome, please.
Okay. Oh, Roseanne, did you have a question? I thought I saw your hand up. Oh, you're on mute. Well, we can't hear you, but you're not on mute.
You hear me?
We can now.
Yeah.
Okay. There's always a lot of talk about ancestors, but ancestors really start with our parents. And so my question's for Joey, because I do know Joey a little bit. And how much does your own mother's path and journey inform yours?
Wow, way to get the shovel out and dig deep. You know, my mom went on a very similar she went on a healing journey, and her courage to go on that healing journey, to make herself a better person, to be there for me and Matthew, my brother, is such an encouragement to continue my healing journey. And I wouldn't have been able to do this without her. So it's everything.
Thank you. And I don't know, Jerome, but I would ask the same question about your parents.
I think that it is who I am as a result of my upbringing. I talk to young people about their strength being their culture, their community, and their upbringing. So being Māori Pacifica, being raised around domestic violence, drug and alcohol abuse, being an alcoholic myself, having an abusive and absent father at a large part of my life is now my strength. And it's not until when I talk to young people about that, I get them to break down how that could be a strength. How being raised in South Auckland, which is, I don't know how to describe that in Canadian terms, but being raised in South Auckland has a certain connotation to it. But it has created a sense of community, empathy, a sense of belonging that only comes with kind of this sort of upbringing. Being raised around domestic violence means I can empathize and be compassionate to people in certain situations where others might not be able to. And so that absolutely has molded who I am today and how I operate. Yeah, it's like one of those things where you're like, yes, we might have lived in women's refuges. Despite all the pain and stuff that happened back then, I wouldn't actually change anything, because I wouldn't be where I am today without that. Yeah.
Thank you. Cook's Jam, Tusen Tak.
Thank you. Keith, you've had your hand up. Go ahead.
I have two questions. One is for Joey, which is, who made your earrings? They're beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much. These were actually made by my coworker Sasha. Her Instagram is Moon River Designs.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The other question
You
is
are
for
very
both of you. And it sort of goes back to some of the commentary in the chat where people were talking about code switching for like safety and stuff. What was the moment where you decided to like take off the mask or just show up? You know, Jerome, you mentioned like changing your voice a bit to sound whiter. Like I'm a two-spirit person, and you know, we often have to code switch to appear heterosexual or straight or a different gender than we maybe feel. And so like, I'm just curious, like, what gave you the strength, both of you, to like make that decision not to change your voice, not to change your face, not to, you know, not to try and fit in, but to like,
Yeah.
to really shine the way you both clearly do.
I kind of went through a really difficult patch in my career where I had a really challenging boss who morally, ethically did things a lot different to I. And I'm a very morally and ethically driven person, to my detriment sometimes, where if anything kind of sits off to the left a little bit, I really struggle to operate if it's not going in a moral direction. And so we clashed in a number of ways. And when it is something that goes against my morals or ethics, I might be kind of a sensitive person, but when it's that, my back gets up pretty sharply, and I have no problem in speaking up. And it wasn't until that point where I was kind of progressing my career that I thought, if I don't say anything now, if you don't stand for anything, you're going to fall for. I just think I'm not going to be able to ever stand up against this environment. I then had one, and sorry, a little bit of background, but I had one instance where I was with my colleagues, and we were out on the viaduct or the harbour here in Auckland, taking a lot of our clients fishing. And when they came back in, we were sharing all the fish that we had just caught. And then once they had taken, we'd split the fish, this very astute white businessman came to the port, and he pulled up in his Maserati and jumped out of his car. And I was the only brown-skinned person at this event. There's probably about 16 of us there. So it was our clients and some of my colleagues. And he came in and he poked his head into the corner. He started talking to my colleague, and he said to him, "Oh, you guys still doing this tracking technology?" I was working for a technology company, and my colleague said, "Yeah, we're still doing it." "Are you still tracking vehicles?" "Yeah, we're still tracking vehicles." And then this very astute businessman took a look around the room. It was dark, the lights were off. And he I feel sick when I think about it. He said, in that moment, I had always thought up until that point that my morals and my ethics would rise above any situation like that, and I would speak my mind. And I didn't. I went silent. My gut churned, and I felt like crying. My colleagues never said anything. The customers never said anything. He just carried on. I wasn't mad at them. I was angry at myself. And so I got in the car and I drove back to South Auckland. And from that point on, I look back at that situation. That was going back, I don't know, 8 years now, maybe 7 years. And to this day, every time I recall that story, it makes me think that I'll never, ever let that happen to me or anyone else again. And I'm not just calling out the racism, I'm calling out the need for people to understand how unique people are, of all cultures, of all ethnicities, but particularly our Indigenous people. So that's kind of where that drive to remain above has come from. I think that was kind of a big turning point for me, to see it in its flesh, to see that sort of behavior in its flesh.
We may be superheroes, but it doesn't mean that we know how to respond to completely ignorant and inappropriate behavior like that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that story. Renata, welcome back.
Tēnā koroa, tēnā koutou katoa. So awesome to be part of this. I managed to squeeze a little bit of extra time in today to be able to jump on. So thank you so much.
Oh no.
Push the wrong button.
Lost her.
Oh no.
I'm assuming you should jump back in.
Yeah. We'll give her a few.
Well, I'll answer Keith's question in the meantime. I kind of like how I'm able to like just be myself all the time. It's kind of out of defiance, honestly. Like, you know, men aren't supposed to wear makeup, or like I just kind of show up as my authentic self, and it creates waves. And it's those little ripples that trickle down all the way down to the bottom. And it really, you know, it might inspire someone else to show up as just themselves. I think was your question.
Yeah, I was sort of curious just what was like the moment that you decided to just start showing up as yourself. And yeah, I appreciate that.
I'm sorry I took that question before you got to answer, Joey. I forgot.
That's okay.
Awesome. Well, I don't know if Renata's, oh, there she is. She's back. Hey, Renata, we're waiting for you.
I'm Aroha mai. My daughter called just as I went to go jump in and say something. So sorry about that. Sorry, it needed to be if I could pick her up from school or not. So anyway, I don't know what my superpower is. I'm still trying to figure that out. I think my superpower is maybe just being one of the only people that's doing stuff in my space. So my question to you guys is, because I tend to be one of the only Indigenous people in my space, what I find is I get pulled in lots and lots and lots of different directions. And a lot of the time it doesn't fulfill what my passion projects are. And a lot of the things that I do, as an example, is educating non-Māori or non-Indigenous people on how to be better in our spaces. So they're already in the top 1%. They've already got university degrees. They've already got a house and kids and a car and picket fence. So they're already really well. And so their first ask of me is, well, how do you improve me more? So they kind of miss the point of actually, I want to focus more on my people and getting better outcomes for my people. And so how do you deal with those things and kind of bringing them back to a way that you kind of going, well, it's kind of not about you. We need to try and kind of change the focus to be on the people that need it the most, and arguably you don't need it the most. So I guess in essence, how do you know, or do you have some strategies on how to choose the right things when you have so many things that are coming at you? Because I feel like every day something being put on my plate,
Yeah.
which is cool, and some of it's really good, but sometimes there's opportunities that I feel like might get missed in between it all, and there's also just not enough hours in a day.
When I helped that talk about that story that I had with that young guy that got into the bank, it made me realize that this is context to the answer, made me realize that helping someone realize their potential or kind of tap into their potential kind of unleashed them almost into a new world, because they saw something they never thought possible. And so since then, my why that kind of wakes me up in the morning and keeps me up late at night is to help someone achieve something that they never thought was possible, so that they can begin to identify, understand, and realize their potential. And that's something that I rattle off all the time to myself, because I use that as a lens that I look through when I have competing priorities. When something comes at me every day, or an opportunity gets put on my plate and says, hey, Jerome, can you do this? Can I contract you to do this piece of work? Or can you come and do this workshop? Or can you spend some time with this group of rangatai? I have to filter that through my why, which is, again, to help someone achieve something they never thought was possible, so that they can begin to identify, understand, and realize their potential. And if it does align with that, then I find that the work that I do is fulfilling. If it doesn't align with that, I find that I'm pushing water uphill. But that only came about through me happening upon that and kind of reflecting on my journey to then understand what my why is. Why do I do what I do? And now when I make decisions, I'm like, I can say no to that. I used to find it really hard to say no, but I can say no to that because it doesn't align with my why. Yeah, that's kind of what I do to help with my competing priorities, if that answers it.
That's such a great answer, because that's kind of how I go about things too. But it's like a very similar idea, but it's just different wording. I'm like, does this service me? Does it service others? Does it service the goal? And you know, it might service others, but is it servicing others that I need to be servicing? Or is it like, is this my place to be doing? Or can this, you know, is my energy better spent elsewhere during this time? And of course, there's just not enough time in the day. So I try to filter it out like that. Like, is this going to be able to help me reach my goals and help, you know, the people that I'm trying to help reach their goals of empowerment?
Nice.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. And I know there's a few people that need to brave the winter weather outside to drive friends to the airport. So we might wrap it up just now, but I want to invite Celicia just to share a little story about our superhero in training. I think she can put it best, just to leave us in this conversation with some context about why this is important to have these dialogues.
Yeah, so I am so fortunate where I've kind of stepped into, you know, the caregiving role for my niece and my nephew. And my nephew is 9 years old, and I'm trying to explain to him, working with INDIGI-X, what we do. And so I sat him, he's always kind of, why are you on the computer so much, Auntie? And I'm like, well, I got to tell you what I do then. And I was like, you know, we get together with like Indigenous, like change makers from around the world, and we talk about community issues and how we can solve them and be leaders in our community. And he takes a moment and he sits with himself and he says, Auntie, are you guys all superheroes? And in that moment, I realized, yes, we are all superheroes. And I'm so excited to be able to have him sit down and understand that change makers means superheroes, and we can all look, sound, and feel different about that. So I think that in its own is so beautiful. And I apologize he couldn't be here today. I know, I mean, where we are, it is very snowy, very cold, and the roads just weren't safe enough. Yeah, so I'm so happy to have you, Jerome and Joey. I wish that
Thank
you
you
could
so
have
much
met
for
with me.
having me and for everybody coming this
Thank you.
evening.
Yeah, so
Thank you, everyone.
that's a wrap. I might just plug, so follow us on LinkedIn. We have a little Instagram following as well. And I think in a year's time, we're all going to reflect on where we were. And I think both Joey and Jeremy are going to be in completely different places doing wonderful things, helping others. So my deepest of gratitude to both of our panelists and everybody that attended today. And we'll see you at the next workshop. Hi.
Thank you. Good fam.
Thank you.